monopoly system was actually one of the serious issues in Taiwanese history throughout the Japanese colonization. And later on, we'll talk about the WHEI-MING incident, the incident of 28th of February. That was also caused by the monopoly system because of the cigarettes, right? So, have you been to the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall area? The building of the monopoly office, or the monopoly bureau, was still there, existing there. Built for this purpose, and that's the original place of the WHEI incident. They started there, and the place, the building itself is very classic, just opposite to the presidential residence. So, do you know where this building is? No, it is in the Nanmen, yeah, the Southgate area, the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall. In Beirut, this is the Zhongshan Tang. Okay, now we will talk about the monopoly system again. Just as I mentioned, because of the financial situation in Taiwan was very serious task for the colonial government. And in order to get the independence of the financial expenditure, the colonial government decided to set up a system to work effectively. And we have to know also that during this time, the colonial government, the Japanese colonial governor general, was still in operation to fight against the Taiwanese rebels. And all this kind of military maneuver, military operation, all require a lot of money. So to reach the financial independence was really not easy. And we just can imagine how high, right, the income of the different taxes are or were at that stage. Well, as I said, normal people who doesn't consume opiums didn't have to pay. But later on, the monopolized goods like salt, flour, and so on, they were kind of became a very heavy burden for the local people. And this is the person, Godo Shinpei, who was in charge of who was the civil governor then, and in charge of all this system, the policies. He was actually a man of noble birth, trained in Germany as a military doctor, and served in the military in Japan. And because of his performance in the military, he was actually acquainted with the Governor General of Taiwan, Kodama. Kodama invited him to Taiwan to serve as the civil governor. And the Governor General, Kodama himself, was actually in different areas. He was actually a general and working hard on training the troops to fight against, or for the preparation of possible warfare against Russia. Don't forget, 1904 is the Japanese-Russian War, and Kodama was in charge of the whole warfare. And therefore he left Taiwan in Godo Shinpei's hand. And Godo Shinpei was actually the acting Governor General. All these policies were actually introduced by him. So when Japan annexed Taiwan in 1895, there were many opium smokers on the island. Opium was still a serious threat to Japan, and Goto Shinpei started to work on this issue. As I mentioned, he was actually a military doctor. He has the medical background. He was actually quite aware of the effects of opium over human beings. And therefore, first of all, he started a so-called biological policy. It was actually a gradual prohibition on opium. The so-called gradual prohibition on policy on opium was actually those who started already should not be forced to stop. We just have to prevent the new starters. And in 20 years' time, in 30 years' time, they'll be okay. Yeah.
Prevent the new Japanese starters?
No, Taiwan.
All
Taiwan. Only the Taiwanese. Don't forget, the one condition is the Japanese. No single Japanese will be allowed. If those Taiwanese who started already, they let keep on consuming, but just no new young men to join this game should be fine. Therefore, this is so-called gradual prohibition on the matter. And when he became the Kodama Gentaro's principal advisor on opium in 1897, they set up the opium monopoly system in Taiwan. And another one of these person in charge was actually the Iwai Tatsumi. The Iwai Tatsumi was actually the director of the Monopoly Bureau, and the Monopoly Bureau was actually the organization in charge of the whole thing. He proposed that revenue of the opium monopoly system should be used to finance the government general. And this idea was actually taken seriously, and only because of these ideas, the so-called gradual prohibition was stopped. Just think about it, when they started introducing the so-called license, right, the opium consumers should have applied for a license, and the license alone cost a lot, right? But once you have the license, you are allowed to smoke, and the government monopolized the opium itself. So the government imported opium and refined it in different grades, and different grades cost, of course, different price. And say the opium first grade cost something like 12 yen per ounce, and 12 yen was actually the 3 months income for a builder or a laborer, and you can think about the price. And then in return, the government started the license for sale. Those who actually will work with the Japanese government will be granted the privilege to deal the opium sales. And that is to say, you can certainly, this is a guarantee of profits, and only those who work with the so-called collaborators. You work with the Japanese government, you'll be allowed to deal with the opiums, and you'll certainly get profit, and you certainly will support the Japanese government, any kind of Japanese policy. So they use this monopoly system to win all over, and those who are rich, those who are actually influential in the traditional Chinese society, should just stay in bed, keep on consuming the opiums, and leave the civilians, leave the society, leave the mass to the Japanese government. This is the idea. So not only to kill two birds with one stone, they can kill many birds with one single stone, opium. So this is the gradual prohibition policy. he wanted people to stop smoking. So in 50 years' time, when we have noticed the general life expectancy in Taiwan in 1894, 1895 was actually 27 years of age. And the general life expectancy of the Taiwanese nowadays for males close to 80, 79, 78, 79. For females over 80. I think there's a 4 to 5 years difference between male and female. And 1894, 95, the life expectancy was only about 27, right? And was short enough. And in this case, say if the Japanese really want to stop the consumption of opiums in 50 years' time, there was certainly no single one left. But the license was granted to new starters every year, and to the very end of the Japanese colonization, there was still over 10,000 opium consumers in Taiwan. Right. So the gradual prohibition was, in his own term, was actually the so-called biological principle, meaning that the nature will rule out, and the consumers will die out altogether. This is the so-called biological principle. But it's very annoying. Okay. This is how the opium monopoly system runs. That only the government general would import the opium from India, from Turkey, from different countries, and by this time, the Chinese, they produce the opium as well in Yunnan area. And we have to know that nowadays in Yunnan, in Burma, in northern Thailand, this is still the so-called Golden Triangle, or the cocaine, the coke was actually planted there. It was actually the traditional place to provide the world with the drugs. And the government general started to import these opiums, refine it, and the wholesalers will be recruited, and then they can sell this to retailers, who then in turn sell it to the smokers. And this this net was actually very successful, and they built up then the social network. And how the system operates was how did the system operate? Right? First of all, to issue license to the smokers, and then you have to pay a huge amount of money to the license, and no new one should be allowed without license. Right? If you were caught enjoying or smoking opium, you will be punished. And then there's a new license for the selling of opium as a wholesaler, and then you can apply for a license as the retailer, who will also actually used as the license was used as a word, who work with the people, with the government. And then they thought about to cut off the consume bit by bit, and therefore they started to increase the price of the opium. And there is so-called rationing. If you cannot afford it, they will automatically stop the consumption of the opiums. They thought, consequently, the people will smoke less and then stop all the consumption altogether. And of course, this so-called gradual prohibition failed because the monopoly allowed people to smoke, and those people who were actually rich, they could afford it without any problem. And those rich people in Taiwan, they could just simply afford it. And those we have here a lot of stories about those people who smoke all their fortune off. And but in this system, you only, well, as I throughout the Taiwanese history, in colonial time, there's only something like a bit more than 10,000 smokers in Taiwan. That was already enough, right? And the social structure there then in Taiwan was so not like nowadays. Those rich and these rich family, big families, they were actually the huge landholders. They can certainly smoke off without any problem, and therefore the idea of people smoking themselves poor was not realistic. And on the other hand, the Japanese government learned that to sell opium was actually very profitable, and they also realized the opium actually paralyzed, numbed the elite society in Taiwan. Therefore, they would actually love to have this system carry on further, and therefore they never thought about to cut off the opium supply seriously. And another thing was that the Japanese didn't stop or establish a so-called coastal guard, and therefore the smuggle was actually very easy. The people can still smuggle the opium, the raw opiums from mainland China to Taiwan. Also, this is very profitable, and therefore the consumption never stops. Whether you start from the Japanese one or you start the traditional one, of course, still of different quality, but you will nevertheless start the will fill the gap, and therefore the smuggle also helped the continuance of the opium. And actually for the Taiwanese people, they actually prefer the traditional Chinese Chinese opiums. Therefore, we don't forget that since the 17th century on, the smuggle or the traffic between mainland China and Taiwan was very easy, and the coastal line was so long, and since the local people prefer the traditional ones, and the consumption of the opium, traditional opium, was actually was still possible. But they have to buy to get a license. That is without question. Without license, you get punished. But you don't have to buy the opiums from the government. You don't have to buy so much opium from the government. That's one reason of the continuance of the Chinese opiums. So, 1914. That is a very serious. This is a noticeable date. Where after 1914, the rebels of the Han Chinese against the Japanese almost stopped. Right, the last speech of the rebels in Tainan, in Yujing, nowadays Yujing area, the so-called Yuqingfang accident led to a massacre of the massive decapitation in Thailand area. And after 1914, the Japanese government didn't meet any kind of serious resistance from the local people, and therefore they started a new policy towards Taiwanese, and the director of the Monopoly Bureau, Kaku Sakataro, permitted the cultivation of coca for cocaine. And that is the escalation. In 1917, the Japanese opium law was actually reformed so that for the first time, private companies were actually permitted to produce morphine. And the government provided the local people with a more effective way to get themselves high and addicted. Right? The drug entrepreneur persuaded the government to let him sell stock for crude morphine to the government. And then the government even set up a refinery factory for the further process of the morphine. And the morphine, cocaine became a big business in Japan. Opium was actually imported to Taiwan and then to produce the morphine. So that is to say, the Japanese government now using morphine, using opium for the further financial incomes. And a lot of government employees or government officers were actually involved in this matter, in this business. And even their family belongings, their wives, their relatives also invested in the big money, in the big business. Therefore, the Japanese government, the Japanese colonial officers, all profits from the opium business. This was a model to run the Taiwanese enterprises during the Japanese time. This time, the Japanese started to set up sugar refineries. They started to plant a lot of sugar canes in southern part of Taiwan and set up new factories in Taiwan. All the colonial officers and their families actually invested money in the business. And in some of the sugar refineries, you can even see the imperial capital in it. That means the Japanese tenno actually invested in a lot of business as well. So this is actually the common structure of the Taiwanese business. So the monopoly, the opium monopoly shows only one aspect, right? So since the colonial bureaucrats profited in it, they certainly have no reason to stop this business. So later on, there's another new Governor General, Uchida, right? The Uchida was actually accused of corruption in regards to Taiwanese involvement in the drugs, and he was actually sent back to Tokyo in 1922. So even the Governor General himself was actually involved in this kind of thing. You can realize how serious it was. And during this time, there was actually an international conferences on opium, and the legal nations started to call the participation of different countries who were actually in this fighting against the similar problem. after 1920, the Taiwanese Governor General was actually, the post was actually occupied by civilians, not by the military generals. That was actually following the so-called 14 points of the American President Woodrow Wilson. That there was actually in the 1920s was actually a trend internationally that every nation should be able to decide for the future of themselves, and the independence of the nation was actually the international slogan. And the Japanese government actually faced this kind of trend. They have to ease or kind of stop this kind of high-handed policy over Taiwan. And the international conference called for the participation of the cooperation to fight against the opium that was actually aroused the Taiwanese elite. They also noticed this situation and said perhaps the Taiwanese should be more careful about Taiwanese health. And there was a group, so-called the Taiwanese Cultural Unity or Cultural League. They started to kind of send speakers around Taiwan to arouse to make the public notice the situation of the Taiwanese opium. Therefore, in the 1920s, the opium problem in Taiwan caused a serious international scene. And in this case, the Japanese decided, okay, we should send delegates to Den Haag, to different places to take part in the conferences, to show somehow that we Japanese also are interested in our national health and want to stop the consumption of opium. So then there was a certain American called Charles Brent. This was a missionary and protester against opium smoking. In 1906, he wrote to American President Roosevelt and to ask him to call for an international conference so that the opium problem would be brought to the public's attention. And of course, the President Roosevelt agreed, and that was actually the background of the international conference. So, in 1909, there was already a conference held in Shanghai. There was the monument citing, there was the place of the first meeting, first conference held in Shanghai. And that shows that actually in 1910, 1920s, the opium problem was already an international issue. And then the British delegates to the League of Nations started to ask, right, that we should start a conference on opium, and that was actually the background. So, besides Den Haag, in 1925, there was a conference in Geneva. Right? That was actually very influential over the opium consumption and narcotics. And in relation to Taiwan, it required that opium should be reduced. Opium should no longer be consumed. And recording and salary system should be installed. But even though the Japanese government in Tokyo ratified these terms in 1928, they were still not effective in Taiwan. So there's another question about the Taiwanese situation. From the very beginning of 1895, when Japanese take over Taiwan, there was already a special law passed in the Japanese Diet that the Governor General of Taiwan can have the power to issue any kind of orders or administrative orders which has the status of a law in Taiwan. And that is to say, the Taiwanese or Taiwan, which will be exempted from the Japanese jurisdiction or law system, legal system. The Taiwanese government or the Taiwanese Governor General can make any laws that he pleased to rule over Taiwan. And therefore, even Tokyo signed any kind of treaties or administrative agreements, they should not be taken effect in Taiwan. So the legal situation in Taiwan is different from that of Japan, and that is actually one of the core issue. However, that the Japanese Governor General in Taiwan realized that the situation is very serious, and the officers of Taiwan were actually also sent to Europe, to Geneva, to Den Haag, to participate in these conferences, and they certainly brought back some of the information about the international situation, and therefore the Taiwanese government somehow modified their policy that Tokyo compelled Taipei to reform the opium monopoly system in 1928. As I mentioned, that the legal system in Taiwan is different to those in Tokyo, so that even the Japanese government cannot order the Taiwanese government to do whatever the Tokyo thinks right. But somehow opium was actually prohibited, and rehabilitation measurement was actually introduced into Taiwan, and a lot of illicit smoking was actually punished, and there was all that they can do about it. Right? But the local people, the Taiwanese, especially those who were actually trained under the Japanese colonial rule. For example, this is Dr. Du-Ming, who was actually the first doctor trained by the Japanese. And he was actually a very successful medicine researcher, and he started his career under the colonial government. Actually, he was actually one of the two of those colonial Taiwanese officers served in the colonial government, and with the highest ranking. Right. In the Japanese system, there was actually the so-called shinin. There was actually nominated by the emperor himself, the so-called shinin status. There were only two Taiwanese who received this status. He was one of them. And there's another legend about Du-Ming. It was very interesting. When he was actually quite aware of the situation in China, as you know, the Yuan-Shikai, the first Chinese president who wished to change the republican system back to the imperial system and called himself an emperor. And Du-Ming was very angry about this. So he traveled to Beijing, wanted to poison the Yuan-Shikai by putting drugs in the water that Yuan-Shikai consumes. but he didn't have the chance. So anyway, Du Chongming was a very interesting person, and he was actually the first of the Chinese PhD holder. He proposed, right, that the opium addicted should be rehabilitated in hospital in 1929. They say that it's curable, and if you work on it, and a lot of medicine or doctors in Taiwan organized some groups to fight against opium consumption in Taiwan. That's what I mentioned, the Cultural League of Taiwan, and most of them were actually doctors. When you know about, nowadays there's a very interesting person called Jiang Weishui. The President Mao is always talking about Jiang Weishui, who was dedicated to the Taiwanese democracy. And Jiang Weishui was also a doctor, originated in Yilan. So nowadays this freeway from Taipei to Yilan is named as the Jiang Weishui Freeway. They were all these kind of medical doctors and are interested in the public affairs. So then the 1920s, from 1920s on, the Taiwanese adopted the international ideas about the League of Nations anti-opium position, and therefore the Taiwanese started this kind of anti-opium zeitgeist, the spirit of the anti-opium, and they tried different ways to stop the people from smoking. There was a very interesting religious activity called Fuji, Furuan. You know, just like have you experienced any kind of water finding with this twig? Right? The water finding. There was a similar activity in Taiwanese religion that they use a stick and ask for any kind of deity to descend and to communicate with the deity. And they use a table with sand on it, and the stick will actually move around and writing some signs, some ciphers, and the religious men will actually decode it to read it out to publicity. And that was actually very popular during the Japanese colonial time. And they even used this means, this method to persuade the people not to smoke opiums. And therefore this anti-opium zeitgeist was promoted by these doctors. So in 1929, the government general started a new campaign, right? So at that stage, there were actually 25,000 smokers who applied for license, and at that stage there was already 25,000. Sorry, I thought it was much less, but actually it was actually much more. That now you can see with this figure that Taiwanese consumption of of opium was actually very serious. So even now the gentries, the local elites started this kind of campaign. Another very important person called Lin Xiantang, who was actually a very successful merchant in Taichung area, dealing with rice. And if you should go to the Wufeng, nowadays there is a very famous garden, so-called Linjia Garden. There are actually two Lin's garden altogether in Taiwan. One is in Banqiao, as I mentioned. Another one is in Wufeng, owned by this Lin Xiantang, who was actually very interesting as person, very successful merchant. He sent his sons and sent his children to Tokyo for study. He himself visited Tokyo very frequently. And through these kind of visits, he realized one thing, the Taiwanese, though was actually Japanese nationals, were treated differently. Only in Japan he realized that how badly the Taiwanese was actually treated. You don't have enough information because at that stage, all the newspapers, for example, were run by the Japanese. And there was no radio, there was no television, there was no internet. So the Taiwanese were actually prevented or excluded to the world. They didn't realize anything. And only when you go to Japan, you realize your situation. And Lin Jiantang, returning back from Tokyo, he realized that he must do something. First of all, he supported the students in Tokyo, financed them with to publish a newspaper called Xin Qingnian, the New Youth. And the New Youth actually later on moved to Taiwan to publish in Taiwan as a weekly and later on as a daily newspaper to promote or to campaign for the Taiwanese rights. And Lin Jiantang also interested in the fighting against the opium problem. They all realized one thing with the medical method, that it can be these addicted of opium can be easily treated, rehabilitated, and therefore they persuaded or they demanded the government to set up clinics for the purposes, which were denied by the Japanese government. But after the 1930s, the Japanese government started to think about it seriously. So rehabilitated smokers then were actually discharged from the clinics, and there shows actually the first result, the success of this kind of campaign. Bit by bit, the opium consumption stopped, but the morphine became more popular in Taiwan, right? And in the 1920s, 1930s, the Japanese government even expanded the production or the sale of opium to mainland China. As I mentioned, there was the international treaties in favor of these powers, especially those so-called consular jurisdiction, those Japanese nationals who stayed in China will be considered as Japanese. I mean, the Taiwanese who stayed in China will be considered as Japanese. It will be not punished by the Chinese law, and therefore the Taiwanese government, the colonial government, encouraged Taiwanese to set up the opium houses, the opium dens in China, especially in those treaty ports like in Minnan, in Xiamen, in Fuzhou, in Canton, all these areas. A lot of Taiwanese started doing the business, and the opium was actually produced in Taiwan and shipped to China, run by the Taiwanese. The cost, another issue, but under the protection of this consular jurisdiction, the Chinese government couldn't do anything about it. And for those Taiwanese to set up business in China was much easier because you have the same language and you know how to operate it properly. So, come to the conclusion, the opium monopoly system was actually very successful, right? by licensing and by rationing, and throughout the Japanese colonial rule, it was actually one of the best means to collect money. But it was not a perfect system because the corruption was involved, and the commission on sales was actually one of the means to allure the people, to attract the people to work with the Japanese government. On the other hand, well, from other aspects, it was also very successful. And the anti-opium zeitgeist and opium disputes demonstrated, right, that the local people were not happy with the Japanese measurements. Internationally, the international community was actually against the smoking of opiums. So, but the Japanese government still kind of run this monopoly throughout their reign in Taiwan. Okay, that's about the opium situation in Taiwan. Just the situation is shown actually in the dealing of the opium, but it was actually an outcome of the whole Japanese colonial activities, including the legal system, financial systems, and other issues will be discussed further in other topics. So, any questions? If not, we have another 10 minutes break, right?